All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Home Service Marketing Podcast. I'm very excited to be here with a friend of ours, Mr. Bobby Jones, aka Mr. Brightside. How's it going today?
What's going on? Now I'm blessed. Very, very happy to be here and dive into some conversation. Hopefully, we could bring some value to some people.
Oh, yes. I am very excited because I am been waiting myself to talk about this topic with you. And I think all roofing companies and just business owners are going to find it very, very interesting what we're going to talk about today. But for those who don't know you, give us like the quick intro. Tell us who you are, what you do, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so like most business owners, I kind of refer to myself as an underdog entrepreneur, right? Started out pretty shitty in life. My parents were addicts. I was in and out of foster care. Got into some trouble like super early in life. Got arrested for the first time at 13 and like was in and out of jail until I was 21 years old. Got a lucky break in a court case and I got a second chance and kind of been on an upward trajectory ever since that happened. I mean, I say upward trajectory, but everybody who's been in business knows it ain't all the way upward. So I've seen my share of struggles, built the business with some very good team members around me, but we've been in the trenches since the bottom, came up with the brand, the logo, the concept, and worked our way up. So today we sit at about 5 million in revenue. We're in a smaller market, so it's not a huge company, but we really stand for value in a way that's pretty unique here locally. And yeah, we're just really proud of the impact that we've been able to have here in the community.
That was an awesome intro. I think that's something everyone could relate to. I've heard like just hearing your story about what you've been through and how it kind of makes you who you are. And
Yeah.
your company is, where are you guys located? What's your company name and what do you guys service?
Yeah, so we own Brightside Roofing and Siding here in Dover, Delaware. We focus primarily on roofing, even though siding is in the name. We typically about 96% of our business is roofing. We are a retail focused business, although we pick up an insurance claim here or there. We're primarily retail focused residential replacements.
Perfect, perfect. So that gives some context to everyone listening, because what we're going to dive into today, and really where I want to start the conversation, is something you and I kind of touched on, and I'm very excited for you to like really unveil and behind the curtains of your unique selling model, what the process you've laid out that's been successful that every roofing company should know. So can we dive right into that?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's kind of cool too because like I started in the roofing industry as a canvasser. I was knocking on doors for a company locally. I got fired from my job and I was like, all right, I'll do this for now until like something better comes along. And here I am, 15 years later, still in roofing. I was actually pretty good at canvassing. We were just canvassing for the appointment. We weren't actually selling roofs. So again, retail market. So we just knocked on doors in an effort to set up the appointment for the salesperson. That company did promote me into a sales position, and I had some really good, people around me, even though the company wasn't the best. But then I got the bright idea, like a lot of salespeople for roofing companies have, and I went and started my own company. Which was funny because I actually started it with the subcontractor from that company, and they were like, "Here's our cost." I was like, "Oh wow, that's our cost." Well, I was selling it way up here. All we need to do is make a little bit of money on top of this and we'll be fine. So really we went into the market as the cheapest roofer in town, which created a very big flash in the pan, but nothing much more than that. So within 2 years, that company was starting to see some financial struggles. I was actually fortunately able to sell my share of that business and get out. And when I started Brightside, I started it with some family members, and we made a totally different approach. We said we're going to be the most expensive, right? Meaning the highest price roofer in the area. Okay. And so that's how we targeted our price point. We're like, let's get quotes and we're going to shoot higher than everybody else. And then we're going to make that make so much sense to our homeowners that they still have they're going to come to the natural conclusion of choosing us because we're going to pack so much value into this, right? And that's exactly what we did with Brightside. We aimed at being the best. We aimed at being the highest price because we're going to pack enough value in to make it make sense.
I love that because so many people bid their way to the bottom, especially in saturated markets. And it sounds like you had some experience where you tried that route, it didn't work out, and you actually shifted mentalities totally. And I think a lot of people who are in that spot right now competing against those people who are just low ball bidding. We actually literally have a book called like low ball bids, not to do that, and how to overcome that when you're dealing with it in the market. But you went the complete opposite approach. So how has that been working for you? How do you approach being the highest?
Well, so it's a process of reverse engineering, right? Like why would this make sense to a homeowner? How could this make sense to a homeowner? And how can we make this make sense, right? So it's like it's constantly auditing that and making sure that we're evolving with improvements. But I'll tell you, like, just to go back for a second, I give this book some credit. It's very under the radar. I don't know that anybody really knows about it. It's called The 10 Steps of High Definition Selling. It was written in the late 90s, I think, or maybe mid 90s. And it was a company that sold windows. This guy was a window salesperson and he wrote this book. Really, really great book for home improvement based selling. But there was a line in it and it said, if you are not the best, or the company that you're selling for is not the best at what they do, then quit and go and work for the company that is. Right.
Mhm.
And it changed this perspective in my brain of like, when you're the best at what you do, there is a different level of responsibility to the sales process, right? Because now, if you walk out of that house without a contract, you know that you're leaving your prospect in a situation where they could end up in the jaws with the competitor, right? And we know through our own stories, and when I say we, I mean you guys in relation to what you guys do at Business 411. And if you're a chiropractor, you're the best chiropractor, whatever it is, you know the stories of your industry and you know the industry standards, right? So you know what's likely to happen to the person that you do not get under contract if you don't get them under contract. And that's got to be the motivator, right? I could talk about all the benefits and all the things and features of our company and what we do great, but the real motivator is preventing them from experiencing what so many others are out there experiencing, right? And that's the motivator. So we look at that, we constantly audit that in our systems and processes. But from a sales perspective, when you have that kind of a mindset, well, now there's a greater responsibility, right? There's a greater responsibility to the tonality and the articulation of the value proposition and making sure that you present properly, because it's my belief that in the presentation process that nothing you say is neutral. Whatever you say during that presentation is either moving your prospect closer to doing business with you or further away from doing business with you. So that's why we have to be practiced. We have to know how to handle each part of the conversation in a way that is serving the prospect.
You've touched on so many great points
I'm
there.
sorry.
No, that was amazing. I mean, talking about if you are the best at what you do, it is you owe it to the market you're serving to make sure that you are the one they go with. And having that mindset, and it really changes the landscape. And then also what you just touched on. So the presentation part, we are in total synergy that we think that is so important. And there is a reason, even the book you recommended, even if it was from previous time frame, right? Like it's like a little bit old school of a book,
Oh
but
yeah, for
the
sure. They like reference GPSs like it's the next
yeah.
new thing. Like
But those principles have not changed, right?
Correct.
Those sales psychology principles, and something you said is every part of that presentation is either moving you closer or further from the sale. So how do you make sure, obviously you role play and do things like that to practice and get your reps in, but how do you follow that? What are the key things you need to know to make sure your presentation's on point?
Yeah, it's so interesting because like we know we pretend we don't know, right? Like think about like the old infomercials and stuff. And I don't mean to say that there aren't still infomercials. There definitely are, but I always think when I think of the infomercials, I always think of like the ShamWow guy or like, you know what I mean? Like I always think of that guy because he was pretty theatrical in those commercials, but think about it, right? Like they would come into the infomercial like some at some point and he'd be like, "I know what you're thinking." And all of us were like, you don't know what I'm thinking, bro. And then he would say it, and we're like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, right? He wasn't guessing. Like that was research, that was data. We know what our customers are going to say to us. We know what our prospects are going to say to us. We know the objections. We know all of the questions they're going to ask. Yet when we build out our presentations, we oftentimes act like we don't know those things. So if we build our presentation in a way that leads to a natural conclusion, right? Which is us doing business together. Well, then we won't be doing all of the overcoming of the objections at the end. And I think that the real key to this is something that we do, which is like this extreme focus on a consultative approach. And I mean extreme focus. I think so many companies say that they're consultants, right? How many business cards do you guys design and it says project consultant, right? As the salesperson, right? Is it, are you really acting like a project consultant though? Because one of the phrasing, like this is a small part, because obviously we're limited on time because we won't, so we won't be able to dive deep into every part of it. But this simple phrasing, it screams consultant, right? We say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, there's a few things that we're going to show you here today that we think it's really important as you're talking to other contractors. Make sure that they're doing a couple of these key things so that no matter who you choose for your roof, you're going to get a good roof on your home. Now, through that phrasing, I've taken the edge off of the conversation. They have already, they're saying, wow, this guy's okay with me talking to other people. The other guy said that he was the best in that you shouldn't even be talking to other people, right? But me, I'm actually arming you with information and a checklist to take to the other people so that you get a good roof on your home. And at the end of the day, right, this is kind of like that DIY marketing concept where it's like, I'll show you how to tile your bathroom in 5 quick steps. And at the end of the video, you're like, yeah, but I'd have to rent and I'd get those tools and probably ask a few questions. Like, I'll just hire this guy to tile my bathroom, right? And it's the same thing. They don't want, at the end of our presentation, they don't want to go to another contractor and make sure they're going to do these things right. They want to go with the contractor that is going to do the things right. But we let them come to that natural conclusion all on their own, right? Because I'm genuinely, right, with integrity going to provide you this information. And if you choose to talk to other contractors, you'll have it. If you end up going with another contractor, you'll have a better roof on your home through this information 100%. And that's okay too. We're not going to win them all, but that's the consultative approach in the presentation and knowing what they're going to say to you. Make sure, as one of my good friends and my sales manager here says, you're in a room full of doors, right? And if you close these other doors properly through information and education, the only logical door at the end will be to do business with you.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you said. We take the consultative approach as well, but we actually guide them. We have the same exact thing you just mentioned in our presentation of what you should look for in an XYZ company, in a marketing company, in a business development company, right? And same thing with if in a roofing company. So I relate to that. I do want to dive a little deeper, right? I don't want to leave people hanging
Yeah,
too much,
no,
but
that's good. I like it.
you walk me through, I guess, the steps, like the steps that your sales process includes from like A to Z.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to it's hard to go through it because right now I'm in the process of like doing this course, the sales course, and like I'm trying to identify like different steps, but there's the 10 steps of high definition selling, there's 8-step strategies, there's all kinds of different strategies. But the reality is like if you the first step for me is this mindset game, right? This moral obligation part, right? When you go into a selling situation before somebody is going to even take what you say with any validity to it, right? You've got to build some type of rapport. The problem is that so many other trainers will put tons of emphasis on this, and if you're going out to the market with the intention of just becoming friends with everybody, you will do business with plenty of people. But there's a book called The Challenger Sale where they flip that model on its head a little bit. And the data suggests that rapport building is great. But if you're not building tailored solutions for your people and you're selling from a solutions based perspective as well, then if you do both, you're really marrying the two well and you're putting it in a beautiful package. But if you're just doing one, you'll do plenty of business. It's just not all in the rapport building process, right? Like, so building rapport, obviously, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. We've all heard that phrasing. And then we go through like, listen, here's some things to look out for. We see this in our market. We see it. That part does help them, plant that seed of doubt in what they thought was okay in just hiring a licensed and insured contractor. There's the discovery phase. Gosh, this is the other problem. Like you know, in the selling process, there's multiple commitments. If you don't get a commitment to the need, right, you're not going to move forward with the sale. But the problem is that most homeowners have their own version of that need, right? So like if we got to a home and somebody's like, "Hey, I have a leak around my pipe flashing. I need you to repair this." That's great. But the reality is there's a bigger need because now we've seen that you've got 70% granule loss and your chimney's actually leaking too, and you didn't know that. But through our attic inspection, we were able to find that out, right? And then through our shingle, our attic inspection, we also found that there's a leak over here in the valley, and that the sidewall flashing's not properly handled, so it's leaking there as well. But and I love what they were teaching with the Riva organization for a little while because it's like I can go in and tell them all of this, or I can show it to them and allow them to come to the conclusion of it, right? So it's like when we show the pictures through an inspection, it's like, hey, what are you? Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Here's what we found on the roof. I want to show you a few pictures. And I start with the first picture, and I'm just curious, what are you guys seeing in this picture? They're like, "Oh, is that our roof?" Yes, these are the shingles we were just up there, and they're like, "Wow, they look like they're in pretty bad shape." Well, it actually is true. Your shingles have lost a lot of the granules, and we are looking at about 65 to 70% of granule loss on these shingles that are currently on your roof. And then I'll show them pictures in the attic. They're like, "Wow, I didn't realize we had a leak around our chimney." And they're seeing the plywood is in a bad condition. So they're coming to, again, you're going to hear me say this a lot, the natural conclusion that the actual need is something bigger than what they were currently thinking it, right? So part of the responsibility of us in sales is to discover the true need. And if we're the experts, we have to lean into that because sometimes people aren't, they're just willing to, do whatever the customer says is what they'll quote out or give an estimate for. But we have to discover because we owe it to them to have the conversation better if it truly is a need. That doesn't mean because we see this in our industry, and I know you've seen it before, is like it doesn't mean convincing somebody who doesn't need a roof that they need a roof, right? It's ethics. You have to be ethical in your selling process. Now, with that being said, if somebody wants to change their roof because they don't like the color, I'm okay with that too, but they have to want that. I'm not going to just try to pitch them something that they don't need.
Yeah, exactly. 100% ethics and integrity. Don't try to sell somebody like saying false damage they don't really have because they don't know what they're looking at necessarily, right?
Yeah.
It's not, that is 100% like just such a red flag. Karma's going to get you. I don't know what to tell you. But when you're operating with integrity and ethics, you do over the long run build a real company, a real impact, and really help people. And that's why most of us got into business. Usually it's to make a lot of money and help others, right? Those are like the two big things, change people's lives in that way. And
Right.
something you mentioned is everything you say in the sales process is bringing you closer or further. And something you just let in on is you actually have the customer or the lead, right? They tell you what they're seeing. So you bring them in. It's not just you doing all the talking. You're really bringing them into telling you, which you can then use later on. You're kind of objection handling as you go. So what are some more, like share a couple more questions that you strategically ask that bring you closer to the sale rather than further? So maybe some questions you avoid and some questions you specifically ask.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we have like a list of survey questions. Now, most of us have kind of got those memorized. We're not like reading off of a form, but we do want to ask those questions because later on, if they're giving us stalls or objections, we could say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, when we talked about this here, you said that. Is there something about that that's untrue now, or is there something about that you'd like to shift so that we could focus in a different direction? There's a lot of that. Now, we talked about the commitment to the need, right? So before we move into the commitment to the solution, we ask a really important question too, because it's like, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you've seen these pictures. I'm still fully prepared to quote you the repair that you asked me to come out and quote. Is that the direction that you want to, is that the estimate that you still want, or would you like to get an estimate on roof replacement? And now I'm asking the question, they're answering it, right? So they're going to say, well, it seems like it's probably in our best interest to get a quote on replacement at this point. And I'd say something like, well, I'd make that recommendation to you if you were asking me, but again, I am prepared to give you the estimate that you asked me to give today. Now, with that being said, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I'll go through a few other questions, one of the most powerful questions, and I ask it now, This is where I ask this question. And this is going to help us with urgency later, creating urgency later, which I find one of the biggest issues in our industry is like, if the roof is not caving in, the salespeople have a hard time creating urgency for people without applying pressure. Does that make sense? So this question helps create urgency without applying pressure. And it's simply this. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the quote that I'm going to provide today is good for 30 days. However, we also offer our homeowners with a discount at the time of the first estimate, which I can explain a little bit more later, but it's only available today. Would you only like to hear the price that's good for 30 days, or would you like to hear both prices? And every single, I would say 9 times out of 10, Arielle, they're going to say, oh, well, I mean, we'd like to hear both prices here, right? They're going to little standoffish still, but they're like, well, we'd like to hear both, right? Well, now they're telling me that they're prepared. If I can make this make sense, they're prepared to do business today. If I can make this make sense to them, that's what they're telling me, right? So now I'm going to go through my presentation. I'm going to get the commitment to the need, which we already talked about. I'm going to get the commitment to the solution, which again is that consultative approach. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, no matter who you choose, make sure they do this and this. Do you agree that that would solve the problem that we're looking at up there? Do you agree that this would be a resolution to the chimney flashing issue that you're seeing right now? Right? I'm getting these mini commitments to the solution, right? So that commitment to the solution comes through the way that I describe the company and talk about, like, I talk very, very in detail about the products, but I also talk very in detail about what makes us specifically different, because a lot of people, they have issues when another competitor has the exact same proposal and they're lower. I'm like, it takes way more than matching the materials to give you the same roof that we're going to give you. Okay. So I don't want to play that game. I want to make it clear throughout my presentation that it's so much more than matching the materials. Right. So that's the commitment to the company. Right. So I've got the commitment to the need, the commitment to the solution, and the commitment to the company. Now, at the end, I need the commitment to the price. So once I get to my price presentation, which we do a good, better, best model. Okay. So a lot of companies do. Throughout my presentation, I've been pitching the best package the whole time. I lead with the best, right? Because again, I'm positioning myself as the best. Why would I drop my materials down and pitch something else? I'm pitching the best option, right? And if for some reason, if somebody can't find that within their budget, we have a drop down option, but I literally will show them, hey, you're not going to get this and you're not going to get that, but we do have a drop down. So when we get to the price presentation, I'll say, now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'm about to work up those numbers that we talked about. These numbers are good for 30 days. Before I do that, I had mentioned to you that we have a discount that's available only today. Now, I want to be clear about this because some people misunderstand me. When I leave the house today, that discount goes away. And the last thing I want to do is tease you with a discount that you can't take advantage of tomorrow. So I'm going to work up the price for 30 days. Do you also want to hear the price that's only good for tonight? And again, I'm letting them steer this ship. I'm not applying the pressure. I'm not saying you have to take action tonight in order to save this money. I'm saying for us to discuss this, I want you to understand the terms of that discount, right? And this is the key. This is the thing that I've never seen anybody else doing, because it really lets the homeowner steer the ship, but nobody wants to walk away and leave money on the table. So they're thinking the same thing I'm thinking, which is it makes so much sense to do business tonight, you know? So so if I've price conditioned properly throughout my presentation, I'm going to turn my good, better, best worksheet, which you guys created our magazine for this. We actually have the worksheet in our magazine. If you'd like, I can go. I should have grabbed one of those, but we actually have the workbook, so that in that workbook we have our good, better, best worksheet. And so I'll put the pricing to the good, better, best out in front of them.
Mhm.
And I'll say one more time. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, already got the commitment from them on the fact that they wanted to hear both prices. I'll say to them, if I said, excuse me, I said, so I'll put the good, better, best out in front of them. Sorry, Arielle. I'll put the good, better, best out in front of them and I'll let them talk. Usually the first thing they're going to say is, and then you said that there's a price that's available tonight that's even better. And I'll say, yes. As a matter of fact, if you guys are willing to move forward and put this problem behind you this evening, we can do everything in the best package for the price of the better, and we could do everything in the better package for the price of the good. Okay. And I'll draw little arrows, right? Now I've taken a three choice option and made it a two, along with the understanding of the urgency tonight. Right. And so now I shut up again. I let them talk. And some people are like, whoever talks first loses. No, this is a win-win situation. Nobody's losing at this table. This is a win-win situation. If they talk, we win. If I talk, we win. This is a win-win, right? But usually, be quiet. Let them process the decision. If I see anything, this is where body language and understanding the psychology of buying comes into play. We all know this. And again, we try to pretend that we don't. What do you do when you and your wife are sitting there talking to somebody that's selling? You have your own buying process. Think about that. Okay. Don't become, don't lose empathy now. So if I
Mhm.
see them kind of giving body language towards each other or any kind of eye contact exchange, this is my go to. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, look, I know that I've described the details of this discount really well. Okay. However, I understand that you guys have not gotten to this point in your life without having a moment or two to discuss these details. Right. So I have a few phone calls that I've missed since we've been sitting here. Why don't you let me step outside, return a couple of those phone calls real quick, and I'll let you guys discuss this for a couple of minutes. If you guys have any questions to discuss, you can do that now. When I come back in, I can show you exactly how we can move forward. Again, leaning into the steps forward, right? When I come back in, usually one of them sold completely and they just want to make sure that the other one is, right? So if I give them just a couple of minutes, they'll do this. It's called the porch light close. We've all heard the porch light close part. That part's not new, right? When I come back in, 9 times out of 10, the checkbook's right there, or the financing, the ID, the driver's license, whatever is sitting there ready to process the application. So, and by the way, on that good, better, best worksheet, there are payment options. So they know when they're looking at it, the payment options are automatically already there. So if they're financing it and we haven't really put a whole lot of conversation into that, they're already seeing their monthly payment option. And I'll tell you, I mean, if I have both buyers and I have everybody in position, Arielle, the closing ratio is north of 80% usually if we're at that point.
That is, I'm ready to sell. I'm like excited. I want to sell a roof right now. It's funny because the question I was going to ask you is, do you offer financing and what's your average close rate right now? And you're saying with this
This
technique, it's over north of 80% is your average close rate right now.
again, this is both qualified decision makers there. This is, there's and it's crazy because like I tell this to people and they're like, well, what if it's solar? Because we do solar roofing too. I'm like, dude, one of my guys last night, he one call closed to 44,000. One call closed to 48,000 the night before that. Solar, solar with roofing. Like it doesn't matter how like we tend to convince ourselves that once something's over a certain price point, we're going to have to do a two call or they're going to need time to think about it. If we know how to have the conversation, they don't. By the way, like we owe it to ourselves and to them to try to close it while we're there. We really do. I mean, like I said earlier, from a mindset perspective, if I leave the house and I don't have them under contract, they might end up with somebody else who's convinced them that they're getting the same thing from them for 5 grand cheaper or 3 grand cheaper or 6 grand cheaper. Right. So I owe it to them to try to have this conversation the best way I can. In addition to that, I also owe it to myself so I don't have to go back. Not that I wouldn't go back for them, but if I don't have to, I can meet with somebody else at that time next week when they want me to come back and sign the contract. Right. So anyway,
That is amazing. No, I am like leaning in excited about this and you shared some real game right there. I mean, I think that is like huge value people can take and just start implementing. So thanks for being like sharing and being transparent. And one of the things you've mentioned a couple things. I love that the average close rate, like you shared, like, hey, this is working and here's our average close rates over 80%. I mean, that's everyone who's listening to this right now, I know wants to be at 80 over 80% close rate. I mean, the average or the low is like 30%. So to be at 80, that's huge.
and again, like I said, this is both buyers. This is a need. There's an actual need to it because again, the people that I think like are really struggling with their closing ratios. Well, stop trying to sell people stuff they don't need, bro. Like, how
Yeah.
about that? Like,
Yes.
but if there's a genuine need, right? So again, these are qualified buyers. I don't want to brag about my closing ratio, but it's qualified buyers, qualified situation. Yes. If I've got both decision makers there and I've gotten to that point in the presentation, yes, we're north of 80%.
That is awesome. Yeah, obviously we talked about it, very important doing the right thing. So these are people who actually need this, right? It's not just trying to sell anybody, and that's an important part for people to understand. Now, something I see missed all the time by roofing companies, home service businesses is quoting them on the spot. So I can't tell you how many business owners I see right now go there, they send someone there, they do the measurements, they do the inspection, whatever it may be, and then they say, okay, we'll send you the quote and we'll call you to follow up. Like they call to follow up. I mean, it's like the biggest missed opportunity. So you're 100% of the time, if they need it, like you said, they're qualified, quoting on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, again, we do solar roofing, which sometimes requires a little bit more support. So we do, like I said, solar roofing, right? So like if I'm in a selling situation where we're about to sell a roof and they want or mention solar, I might not be completely prepared to be able to offer that on the spot due to the design, that kind of stuff. So again, there are some times where we have to go back, but if we can do it while we're there, why wouldn't we lean in, try to be as prepared as possible? So again, even in those situations, like Kelsey's trained to, try to get the electric bill and try to make sure that we've already pulled the report for the solar layout, which is a lot of support from GAF for that. So we're trained to try our very best to be as prepared as we can for the visit because you're never guaranteed a visit back. I don't care how good you are. And by the way, like if that's the case, now your sales strategy has to be built on the second appointment. Like you're not going to close them on the roof. So now you've got to use that sales skill on making sure you confirm the appointment and the importance of getting back because what are they going to say? Yeah, just email it to me. We've already met. Like now just email it to me, right? We've got to use our sales skills on making sure that we can get back in the house.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, you
there's a
make it
couple of tips for
simple.
that too. It's like, listen, I'm actually going to be back in your neighborhood meeting with someone on Wednesday. Do you have any spare time? Like maybe around 7, right? Is like, that's the canvassing experience in the background there. But it's like, hey, make it seem like it's no big deal. Make it seem like it's no inconvenience to us. And we're going to be in your neighborhood anyway. Make it seem like a super casual visit so that you can get that appointment back.
Yeah, 100%. You make it harder. You always want to close on the first go. Getting back into the home, you're already going to have like it's a little bit more of the uphill. So getting them in that one, that one appointment's so important. How long would you say your average appointments are to go through this very commitment driven, where you're doing the checkpoints throughout process?
So anywhere from like my average time is 3 hours in a home. But with that being said, right, I'm not driving back. I'm not coming, right? So, like, if I'm in a home, and by the way, that's also like cold lead, the coldest of leads, right? Like, they don't know they need a roof. They might not have much familiarity with our brand or who we are as a company. If that's the case, I'm there 3 hours. Now, if it's a referral or they're convinced they already need a roof replacement, it might be a lot less than that. But my average is 3 hours. And I want for the people that are listening and be like, my customers would hate me if I was in their house for 3 hours. Yeah, well, be more likable. That's one. And two, when we're finished, they're thanking us. They're apologizing for taking all of our time. They're thanking us for putting the extra effort in. It's that kind of exchange. And when we're done with the roof, it's even better because now they've gotten an actual delivery of the promises, right? And we've all seen those experiences. I worked for a company who had me convinced that we were the best at what we did. I went out to the market selling in that fashion. And when I got to the job site on the day of, I'm like, first of all, who the heck are these people? They're not even the same people that were on the roof last week. And where is any representation of this company in any way, shape, or form? And it was just embarrassing. I felt like I was robbing people without a gun. And so we flipped that on its head here.
Yeah, I hear that way, way too often. No, I think this has been really, really good so far. You mentioned something about the materials, like, and not materials of the roof, but materials of like what you actually bring when you show up going into an appointment to set up the process for success, leaning into and moving closer to the sale, not plugging in our magazines we've designed, but
Oh, no.
what do you bring to the job? Like I mean, you could share if that's your process, and use the magazine, but like what materials do you
Mind if I
bring?
grab one real quick?
Yeah, grab it. Let's do it.
All right. So, a couple of things real quick to answer your question. Obviously, you want to bring samples. I think that's such a missed I think it's just a missed thing. Like, I don't know why people wouldn't bring samples, but one thing that people have to understand is like when your prospect touches something, right? When your prospect sees something, everything they touch, feel, see, they're assigning a dollar value to it, right? So part of price conditioning is just presenting every detail, right? Because if you skip over something, they're skipping over the justification of that in the price as well, right? So think about that. Like when we're presenting, we need to be showing them everything. Now, with that being said, we go into a house with a couple of things. One, iPad, right? So we present, right now, we actually have a PowerPoint presentation, but we are signed up with Engage. I'll give them their plug. I don't know if you guys have an affiliate for that, but Engage is the video virtual interactive presentation process. So we are signed up for that, and we're waiting for our custom presentation to get back to us. So in the meantime, we're still using our PowerPoint, but we update that thing all the time. It's very, very specific in that journey that we've talked about. And then, so we take our iPad, we take our sample bag, and then we take a folder. That folder, you guys also did the folders. Oh, yeah, maybe not. Anyway, but you definitely did this part. So we take in a folder, and then, of course, like the material literature. But again, when I say that, it is so important to make sure your homeowner is clear about the understanding that the 30% of the value of your proposal should be the materials that are being used, right? If you make it seem like that's all of the value, well, then it's easy for your competitor to match you. It's easier for your competitor to come in and be like, we're using the same materials, we'll be $1,000 less. And to which, by the way, this is, you guys can take this too, because I love this line. I always say to them, I'm like, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, would you agree that I have all the same ingredients, or I have access to all the same ingredients that Gordon Ramsay has access to? And they'll be like, well, yeah, we could all buy the same ingredients. I was like, right. But do you think there's a chance that I'm cooking the same meal that Gordon Ramsay's cooking? And they'll laugh, right? So why would we assume that just because they have the same materials that they're making the same roof? And it's like a light bulb goes off. We have to be able to connect the dots to understanding that they'll have. So anyway, business
We are
401.
all stealing that example. We are all stealing that. Everyone listening is stealing that.
Yeah, I love it. So you guys did these. Again, I want to bring, there's tons of value in here. And what I really love about what you guys did is like you added all of our QR codes in here. So there's like a whole video of me explaining our roofing process. So in the rare instance where I've pitched to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but Mr. and Mrs. Smith's son, who wasn't in the house, happens to have some construction background and he's looking through this later, well, he can scan this QR code and see the value that we bring. And he's going to have to flip through all of this to get to the actual good, better, best worksheet. I don't know if we can see that in the pricing, or there we go. So I'm gonna flip it around just like that. So this is our good, better, best worksheet. And at the bottom here is the pricing and then the monthly payment. Okay. So
And you fill that in, it's blank.
correct. So this is our actual worksheet. We're going through the pricing with them at the dining room table, kitchen table, whatever, on this worksheet. Then once they commit to one of these, that's when we pull up the electronic version and they can sign it, right? But this is the proposal essentially. So, and our price pledge guarantees in here too. So that way, again, if somebody's like, well, we do have a couple other quotes in place, now I can lean on this tool. And anybody that's familiar with their price pledge guarantee, you should understand that this is a tool. This is a tool to use. This properly executed will tell your prospect that it's not worth going to other companies and getting quotes from them because we've done the research. We've done the research so much that we're willing to promise it to you that nobody can do what we're doing for less. And that's the way that this should properly be leveraged, not in a way that's like, yeah, go get other quotes. Now, again, I do encourage that, but I know nobody in this area is going to do what I'm doing. So why am I actually setting them up for failure in going out and executing on this when we know that they're not going to do what we're doing? Nobody's doing what we're doing. And if they are, then shame on you for not continuing to improve.
100%. Yeah, we created that magazine to create an elevated type of material you could bring and really set yourself out, because a lot of people still do things old school ways or go with some business cards or some brochures that are all crumpled up, like they pulled it out, it's like bended, it's just like
Or
no
they
real value.
leverage or they leverage the Owens Corning literature or the Certainty literature or the GAF literature, which is the same literature that the next guy's going to come in with or the guy before you came in with. So you look the same. You have
Every
to make
yeah.
it. Yeah, that's why we talk about all the time. We don't install GAF roofs. We install Brightside roofs, and we happen to use GAF material in that process, right? And that's the way that we really need to be, because if we're not, anybody can install a GAF roof. Only Brightside can install a Brightside roof.
That is repositioning at its finest, you know, and just or positioning in general. And that's why we felt every company needs to have a custom sales presentation they could use that follows their process, not a general one. It needs to be unique to the company. And so something you said is you don't, you know, first of all, thanks for sharing that magazine. It looks awesome. We're super proud of it, and we're happy you use it on literally giving a quote and on your presentation.
I have to
So
update it, sadly, so we're gonna have to probably ditch like half the ones we have left, but I'll be reaching out to you guys to make some changes because we got a new package coming, but it's all good.
we got you. Don't worry about that.
I know you
Changes
do.
are part of it. You know,
Yep.
things are always changing. But you said you don't skip over parts, right? Rushing through is not, it's not, you know, when you're rushing through, you're skipping things, it's going to bite you on the back end. It's not about being the fastest one, it's about delivering real value. So, do you actually go through page by page of that magazine?
Not the magazine, but everything that's in the magazine we cover in the presentation. So the big thing for me on this magazine, Ariel, was again, I'm going to position my worksheet in this magazine so that if for some reason somebody ends up the wild card that they didn't tell me about, that's going to be home in a few hours, wants to look over this. Now they have to flip through this value to get to the proposal and see it, right? So now they can't skip over the value part, right? And so we do lean heavily into this. It is right there while we're pitching, but most of it's still in our presentation. And so what's really good about what you said, and I just want to hit on that for a second. You said never like abbreviate or change, because what happens in doing that, like I was saying earlier, the price conditioning part, right? Like again, everything you show them, they're assigning a dollar value to. I can talk about our starter strip for 45 minutes if I needed to, if they let me. That's how nerded out I am on that product or all of our products. Now I'm not going to spend 45 minutes on our starter strip, but you better be able to, right? You better know your shit, because everything that you show them, they're assigning a dollar value to. And by the way, when so and so shows up and they're using the same materials, but they don't talk about it in the same way, that's the thing that got the dollar value assigned to it, was the passion for it, the emphasis on it, the knowledge of it, right? Which a consumer, a prospect, is assuming rightfully that that will flow over into the installation, right? So there's a line that we talk about all the time in our sales meetings. Nothing the prospect can say or do will stop me from giving a full and thorough presentation. I don't care how many times they look at their watch. I'll say something like this: Mr. Smith, I definitely want to value your time. Are we interrupting anything else that you have going on right now? And typically they'll be like, no, I just, I've got some things I got to get done today. I was like, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the brief version of this. Okay. So we'll get through this quicker. Okay. And then I go right back into it the same way I was going to do it in the first place, right? Because I owe it to him. I can't short him just because he thinks he doesn't have time for this. I owe it to him to make sure that he understands this, even if he ends up with somebody else. I have to educate this man, because I don't want to be back here in 5 years cleaning up somebody else's mess, or 4 years cleaning up somebody else's mess. I want to save him now. I want to help him now, right? So that little line is good. Nothing the prospect can say or do will stop me from giving a full and thorough presentation. And then again, if they are acting as if they need us to speed it up, say, okay, I'll give you guys the quicker version. It might be only be a second or two quicker, but I'm still going to give them the value that they need to have.
Yeah, and that hints the, you know, the longer time frame you're spending with the customer to give them that total perspective. The homeowner probably thinks, geez, this guy's moving in, right? Like this guy,
Yeah.
you
Well,
ever
I
get
joke about that when I bring my sample kit in. I'd be like, "Don't worry, I'm not spending the night." Like again, that's the reason when people are like 3 hours. I was like, "How did you gain enough trust to maybe convince somebody or guide them to the conclusion that they need something more than what they called you for in the first place?" And I already told you we're the highest price in our area. You think that I could just go in, give them a price, and they're just going to choose me if I don't get an opportunity to explain why it's so much more important to go with a company like ours that's going to do what we're doing versus Chuck in the truck or Tank Top Tommy? Like, I have to have time with them.
I love it. I love it. And something that people are probably thinking right now, I know I am, is, of course, the owners go in, oh, I'm the owner. I close 90%. I'm the owner, right? I know. But then carrying that through to the sales team, and it sounds like you do have a team that you're carrying through these principles. So can you just shed light on how do you bring these best practices, this process, how do you really get that instilled into the sales team so that they could deliver the same results and success that you do?
So we talk a lot about mindset. Okay. Again, the responsibility of this. Why does this matter? Why does it matter to go through the presentation more thoroughly? Why does it matter to go through this? Well, the good news is in our industry, we get to see it all the time when we do inspections. We get to see what the industry standard is and why these people are in that situation in the first place. So we should be motivated to stop people from doing that. The other thing is we don't hire anybody from the industry. Sorry. It's just typically a lot of bad practices, and it's so much easier to give birth than to raise from the dead.
Okay, so you're finding people, that's one of the secret tips that you've been using is finding people who have sales experience or great personality, charisma outside of the actual, they've never sold roofs before and you found success with that because you're able to mold them.
Yep, exactly. And it's not, look, my salespeople they all make north of 100 every year, right? And if you don't, you're fired, by the way, because if you're not making north of 100, you're not producing enough. So it's like, all right, we're going to need that, from you. And so, the important thing is to realize, first of all, even me as the business owner, I'm still a student. Me and Jose, one of our salespeople here, we just got back from Chuck Toki's sales training out at Top Rep. Like we're constantly learning. Like I do sales training. I'm going to do a sales training in Orlando in front of, I don't know, like 500 people or something like that. I'm still learning. I'm still a student. I'm going to always be learning and getting better. And so like the humility of that helps my guys have the humility. And so like we're all trying to better each other and get better at this more and more. And I think that helps a lot because it's not tarnished by industry standards. Again, we're already combating the industry standards in the roofing quality of install, the workmanship of it, right? So why would we expect the salespeople that are from another company or been with a couple of other companies to have better practices than the roofer that they were actually working for? It's unlikely at best.
Mhm. Yeah, no, you always have to be a student of the game. And basically what you're saying, 80% north of 80% is not good enough. We need to go north of 90% if you know, to be happy. But no, I think this has been really, really awesome. I feel like we could really go so much deeper. There's so much here, but what you shared so far has been so valuable. I've learned a lot. I know everyone listening already is like, whoa, you're probably going to get a bunch of people reaching out to you.
Yeah, happy to. I've done some training from the workshop that we did that you guys did in Fort Lauderdale. I had some of those companies that were insurance based were like, "Hey, would you mind talking a little bit about retail?" Which is why I love these events because you make so many good connections. And they're like, "Well, we're dipping our toes into retail. Would you mind chatting with us about it?" I'm like, "Heck yeah!" Like I don't charge. Like I'm a person that wants to help. And by the way, I want to also say like emphasis on I am a student to this game. I am not here to tell you guys how it has to be done. I'm simply telling you what's working for us really well. And I'm an enthusiast of it. I'm passionate about it because I've seen it change my life forever. Right. So, like, please understand where I'm coming from. This isn't from a place of arrogance or cockiness or you have to do it this way. Just simply sharing what's really working well for us here.
Yeah, I love that. Spread the love, and people can take and pick and choose what works for them. And that's what this is all about, sharing how you've got to where you are, what's worked, and helping others to avoid mistakes and they don't have to fall in the hole because you've, basically showed them how they could just walk around it. I know I've fallen in many holes. You did very early on, you expressed, and now we're getting smarter, right? We're building, we're walking around the hole, things like that. But
Just
hey,
trying
so
to
I
be more like
want
you, Ariel. Just trying to be more like you.
Hey, listen, I'm trying to be like you with that 80% North close rate. So, hey, this was so, so valuable. Before we wrap up, there's something I want to do. It's a little this or that game, this or that roofing edition. So I'm gonna say two things and you're gonna choose what between the two and we're gonna kind of speed round through it, okay?
Let's do it.
All right, ready?
Mhm.
SEO or paid ads?
SEO,
Door knocking or digital leads?
door knocking,
Shingles or metal?
shingles,
Okay. Free inspections or paid inspections?
free inspections,
Storm restoration or retail?
retail,
I knew you were going there. Drone inspections or physical on the roof inspections?
Physical on the roof inspections.
Okay. Residential, commercial.
Residential.
Sales or production?
Sales.
Roofing or solar?
Both. I got to choose both of them now. We do solar shingles.
All right. And to wrap it up, the big two, Google or Facebook?
Ooh, Facebook.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I knew some of those. I knew some of those were going to be retail and whatnot because that's what you specialize in. But hey, thanks for sharing. Any last to anyone listening, any last thoughts, comments in terms of, advice or just, ending things off here?
Just, listen, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And again, I found something that works here that, I don't mind sharing. And that doesn't mean that I've got it all figured out. It just means that I had some success with this. The other thing that I would say is a lot of people might get caught up on that whole, like, if you're not the best comment, become the best, right? Like, or the phrase from that book was, if you're not currently selling for the company that does the best, then quit and go and work for the company that is. I want you to understand, like, there was a time when we weren't the best. Like, I didn't have the certifications and I had to set these milestones, but I had a vision of that, and I was working really hard towards those goals so that I could say that. And I could tell you that if you're not in that position, if you're like, hey, I don't know, like, I don't really feel comfortable saying that I'm the best, there's two things. One, do you care more than the other person does? Because that's a simple hack, right? Like, you could care more than the other people, and that could also be the differentiator. And if there is a certification that you're after or something that you need to get in order to stand proudly on concrete or bedrock and say, I'm the best at what we do, then just set those goals and work towards that so that you could stand there without any hesitation at a conference with somebody's like, does everybody in this room feel like they're the best at what they do? And that hand can fire up with passion and conviction versus, I kind of think we're the best. There's an avenue to that. You just have to identify what that looks like for you.
Being the best takes time. Michael Jordan wasn't the best all of a sudden out of nowhere, right? That was years in the making. So being the best is a part of the process. And thanks for sharing that and for sharing your sales formula. Just touching base on it a little bit. I'm sure we're gonna have another session because I want to dive deeper with you. But thank you, Mr. Bobby Jones, Mr. Brightside, for joining today. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome. I can't wait. We're going to do it again sometime.